The Spider-Verse is bigger than ever before in the Oscar-winning movie's first sequel. If you thought Into the Spider-Verse was dense with Easter eggs, hold on to your web shooters, you ain't seen nothing yet. Warning, spoilers ahead for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Though Into the Spider-Verse functions as a cohesive narrative, Across the Spider-Verse is the first part of a completed story, with Beyond the Spider-Verse set to pick up where it leaves off. However, Across the Spider-Verse continues to use a lot of the film language the original established. One of those motifs is the use of comic book covers to establish new characters, as well as catch up with older ones.
Alright people, let's do this one last time.
The film opens with narration from Gwen Stacy of Earth-65, examining her backstory as Spider-Woman and teasing her betrayal of Miles later on. Many of those who watched Into the Spider-Verse will recognize the similarities between this opening sequence and the introduction of Chris Pine's Peter Parker in the first film. Some fans may notice that Stacy's comic book cover drops on top of the existing covers that were shown in Into the Spider-Verse. The trend also continues for the reintroduction of Miles, as well as the introduction of new characters. Furthermore, some of these comic book covers allude to the character's narrative history. For Miles' first proper meeting with Miguel O'Hara, otherwise known as Spider-Man 2099, the comic book cover that flashes on screen directly references the first issue of Spider-Man 2099. Miles Morales remains the protagonist of Across the Spider-Verse, but the extended opening of the film centers a narrative on Gwen Stacy following the events of Into the Spider-Verse. When she's not slinging webs and avoiding captivity, Gwen also shreds on the drum kit, which serves as the opening image of the film. After she's finally interrupted mid-solo, comic book fans will notice a bass drum, which is labeled the Mary Janes. Obviously, this fictional band name is a direct reference to Mary Jane Watson, who is Peter Parker's other notable love interest. However, Gwen's involvement in the Mary Janes dates back to her comic book origins. The band made their debut in Spider-Gwen's introductory comic, Edge of Spider-Verse, released in 2014. In that comic, her fellow band members are established as Betty Brant, a version of Mary Jane Watson who later becomes Carnage, and Gloria Grant. Over the years, many actors have taken on characters in the Spider-Man franchise, but arguably only one performer has redefined an iconic antagonist of Peter Parker's. That actor is none other than J.K. Simmons, who will forever be remembered as J. Jonah Jameson of the Daily Bugle.
Crap, mega crap. I'll give you $200 for all of them.
After appearing in Sam Raimi's original trilogy, fans of Spider-Man were thrilled to see Simmons reprise his role in the mid-credits scene for Spider-Man Far From Home. Simmons then played a small role as Peter Parker's loudest critic in the follow-up, No Way Home, and makes a comeback via voiceover and Across the Spider-Verse, protesting the actions of Spider-People throughout the multiverse. The character even briefly appears in the flesh, or rather brick, during one sequence that takes place in the world of Lego Spider-Man, which is the only time in the film Peter Parker's work at the Daily Bugle is referenced. Gwen Stacy's backstory is only briefly alluded to in Into the Spider-Verse, as her character introduction explains how her best friend, Peter Parker, became the Lizard, and was subsequently defeated by Gwen in battle. However, the opening of Across the Spider-Verse delves deeper into the characters and what led to this moment, which all originates in Gwen Stacy's introduction to Spider-Gwen in Marvel Comics. After getting bitten by a radioactive spider, Gwen begins living a double life as Spider-Woman, using her powers of super strength to intimidate Peter Parker's bullies on the side. However, fed up with being picked on, Parker downs the Lizard's serum, turning himself into a monster that attacks their school prom as an act of revenge against his bullies. Gwen unknowingly kills Peter in the subsequent fight, and runs away when her father, Captain Stacy, shows up at the scene of the crime to find Spider-Woman standing over a murdered Peter Parker. Although this is established in Into the Spider-Verse as Gwen's reasoning for remaining distant from others, this explanation in Across the Spider-Verse follows the art from a debut comic. Some of the sequences in this extended opening even mirror panels from the comic, such as one moment when Peter injects himself with Dr. Connor's serum. Peter's final words to Spider-Gwen during this scene are also directly taken from the comic, revealing he knew her secret identity. The world of the MCU has been focused on the concept of the multiverse lately, from the bureaucracy policing the flow of time in Loki, to the introduction of the next Avengers-level threat in the multiversal conqueror Kang. However, Into the Spider-Verse was the first Marvel film to really delve into the comic book origins of the multiverse. The multiverse also played a major role in another Spider-Man film, Spider-Man No Way Home, in which Tom Holland's Peter Parker becomes a target of supervillains from the Sony-Verse, after convincing Doctor Strange to toy with the memories of everyone on Earth. These events seem to be obliquely referenced in Across the Spider-Verse by Miguel O'Hara, during an early scene in the film as he describes the instability of the multiverse.
Don't even get me started on Doctor Strange and the little nerd back on Earth 1999-99.
Ganke Lee in Marvel Comics is Miles Morales' best friend, as well as one of the few people who knows his secret identity. However, the character's appearance in Into the Spider-Verse was a minor, non-speaking role, seen most notably when he walks in on Miles and the other Spider-People hiding in their shared dorm room. However, Ganke makes a slightly more prominent appearance in Across the Spider-Verse, when Miles stops in his dorm after capturing the Spot and asks Ganke to call the cops. During the brief moment between Miles and Ganke, Ganke expresses disinterest in being Miles' guy in the chair, which results in him not doing anything when the Spot eventually escapes captivity. For fans of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, the phrase "guy in the chair" will sound a little familiar, as it's said many times by Peter Parker's friend Ned Leeds.
Hey, can I be your guy in the chair? What? You know how there's a guy with a headset telling the other guy where to go?
This Easter egg also references some connective tissue between Ganke Lee and the MCU's Ned Leeds. The latter looks visually much closer to Ganke Lee in the comics than he does to Ned Leeds that eventually becomes a hobgoblin. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller have a long history of producing and creating animated films, including Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and The Mitchells vs. the Machines. The two also co-produced Into the Spider-Verse and returned to help pen the scripts for both Across the Spider-Verse and 2024's Beyond the Spider-Verse. Given their greater creative input on the second and third films of the trilogy, Lord and Miller saw an opportunity to pay tribute to one of their biggest successes in animation. That success is the Lego Movie, which the creative duo co-wrote and co-directed, was released in 2014 to glowing reviews for its stop-motion style animation and storytelling. The two also co-wrote and produced the film's 2019 sequel, The Lego Movie 2, the second part, as well as producing the Lego Batman movie, the Lego Ninjago movie, and spin-off Cartoon Network series Unikitty. In Across the Spider-Verse, Lord and Miller go back to their Lego roots for a moment in the film when the Spot, while jumping between multiverses, ends up creating havoc in the animated world of Lego Spider-Man. Slipping away from his job at the Daily Bugle, Lego Spider-Man himself contacts Miguel O'Hara and the Spidey Society to alert them to the danger of the Spot, setting off many of the events of the film. Though it's a moment mostly played for laughs, it's a fun Easter egg for Lord and Miller's past work. Lord and Miller's work isn't the only thing referenced during the Spot's multiverse jumping in Across the Spider-Verse. When the Spot crashes into the Lego Spider-Man world, he also mistakenly ends up in the live-action Sony-Verse, where he has a brief interaction with Mrs. Chen, played by Peggy Lou, the owner of a convenience store that Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock frequents in Venom and its sequel, Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Hilariously, Mrs. Chen is unfazed by the presence of the Spot, which may have something to do with the fact that she's briefly a symbiote host in Let There Be Carnage. While hanging out at night with his Uncle Aaron, Miles is, like many spider people across the multiverse, bitten by a radioactive spider. However, what makes Miles an anomaly is that his spider came to his home world of Earth 1610 from a different universe, Earth 42, with Miles' acquisition of powers resulting in the death of his universe's Peter Parker and the instability of the multiverse. Though this fact plays an important role in why Miguel O'Hara targets Miles, as well as why Miles himself ends up on Earth 42 at the end of the film, the number on that spider is no coincidence. Miles Morales' co-creator Brian Michael Bendis numbered the radioactive spider as a nod to the legendary baseball player Jackie Robinson, who wore the number 42. The number pops up in a number of places throughout Into the Spider-Verse, and Miles can be seen wearing a jersey with the number 42 in Across the Spider-Verse. The number 42 also holds additional meaning for sci-fi fans. In The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, 42 is established as the answer to, as the book states, the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything.
Yes, I thought it over quite thoroughly. It is, it's 42.
When Miguel thinks that Miles' status as a universe-ending anomaly is a problem, maybe it means that he's the answer instead. In the history of Spider-Man as a film franchise, there is probably no scene as iconic as a big romantic moment in Sam Raimi's 2002 film. You know the one. After rescuing Kirsten Dunst's Mary Jane Watson from a group of muggers in the rain, an upside-down Tobey Maguire passionately kisses his high school crush. While few romantic pairings have been able to hold a candle to Maguire and Dunst in Spider-Man, Miles and Gwen's flirtations and Across the Spider-Verse come pretty close. Before Gwen disappears into a portal to chase down the Spot, she turns around and knowingly face-to-face with an upside-down invisible Miles. Though they don't end up locking lips, it's still a nice homage to one of the most iconic scenes in Spider-Man history, and sets up their romantic tension to continue in the next film. Aunt May isn't as present in Across the Spider-Verse as she was in Into the Spider-Verse, with Miles establishing early in the film that she moved to Florida. Though this seems like a random fact, it actually has some basis in Aunt May's comic book origins. The Aunt May that appears in the Miles Morales comics has family that lives in Florida, making her move there in Across the Spider-Verse potentially a homecoming for her. Of course, Florida is also a popular state for elderly citizens to retire in, so maybe we're reading too much into Aunt May's choice of new destination. Still, in the tangled web of the Spider-Verse films, no details go unnoticed. So it's possible that Aunt May has her own adventure ahead of her when she arrives in the Sunshine State. Into the Spider-Verse was heralded as an outstanding tribute to the history of Marvel Comics. Not only do the different characters of the films embody differing comic book aesthetics, but the film's narrative also cleverly utilizes comic book tropes to enhance the storytelling. One example of this is through its use of comic book flourishes to make the film feel like a comic book page brought to life. And across the Spider-Verse, there are many moments that utilize editor's notes, which briefly flash on screen to, as they do in comics, provide context for the audience on characters, cultural differences, and unexplained lore. However, one editor's note in Across the Spider-Verse makes a callback to a beloved character from Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Ham. During the confrontation between the Renaissance Vulture and Gwen Stacy, Miguel O'Hara, and Jessica Drew, O'Hara comments on Vulture's use of hammer space. According to an editor's note, hammer space refers to a cartoon character's ability to pull objects, such as a large hammer, out of their pocket seemingly from thin air. Obviously, those who have seen Into the Spider-Verse recognize this as an ability possessed by Spider-Ham, who actually does pull a comically large hammer out of his pocket during one of the film's climactic scenes. In 2018, two major Spider events happened. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse hit theaters, and Insomniac Games released Spider-Man for the PlayStation 4. Since then, Insomniac has developed several expansions and sequels, including 2020's Spider-Man Miles Morales, which retells the origin story of the Spider-Verse protagonist and his partnership with Peter Parker. Naturally, the Insomniac Games iterations of Spider-Man make multiple appearances in Across the Spider-Verse. At first, Miles' roommate Ganke Lee can be seen playing Spider-Man on his TV, instead of writing an essay during several early scenes in the film. However, the more prominent cameo comes way later in the film, when Miles is being taken to meet Spider-Man 2099 in the Spider Society's headquarters. At one point, the Insomniac Spider-Man, as well as Insomniac's Miles Morales, appear among the residents of Nueva York in a full CGI render, just like in the games. The climax of Across the Spider-Verse comes when Miles Morales is taken to Nueva York on Earth 928, and Miguel O'Hara has gathered the Spider Society. The sequence where Miles Morales is introduced to this society is filled with more cameos than one audience member will be able to spot in one sitting. Predictably, most of these alternate Spider people originate from comic books or other official Marvel-produced Spider-Man content. Among some of the highlights are Otto Octavius' superior Spider-Man, while Alfred Molina cameos as Doc Ock through archival use of his voice from No Way Home. Other Spider people that appear include Spider Doppelganger, Iron Spider, Julia Carpenter's Spider-Woman, Peter Parked Car, Ultimate Tarantula, and Spider-Man 2211.
Do I, have web on my face? What's the deal?
One of the most surprising cameos in Across the Spider-Verse has been a long time in the making. At one point during Miles' exploration of the Spider Society's headquarters, he meets an alternate version of his uncle, Aaron Davis, aka the Prowler. But this version of Aaron Davis is played by a live-action Donald Glover, who originally debuted the character in the MCU's Spider-Man Homecoming as a low-level criminal when Tom Holland's Peter Parker interrogates for information about the Vulture. What might make fans extra excited is that, this time, Glover's actually wearing the costume. Although a deleted post-credit scene in Homecoming teased Glover's Aaron Davis' close relationship with Miles Morales, the character has yet to reappear in the film franchise.
Yeah, sorry, Miles, I'm not gonna make it. Yeah, I'm just stuck.
While the appearance of Glover is enough to satisfy many fans, it also serves as an Easter egg to the origin of Miles Morales as a character. According to comic book creator Brian Michael Bendis, Miles' design was inspired by Glover, who was the subject of an online fan campaign to get him cast as Peter Parker in The Amazing Spider-Man. It won't be the last time you'll see Glover in a Spider-Man-related film either. The Atlanta creator is also set to star in a future Sony-Verse film as the minor comic book character Hypno Hustler, a frequent antagonist of Spider-Man. The multiverse has played a major role in the on-screen Marvel universe lately, largely thanks to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. In the years following the end of the Infinity Saga in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel characters have begun exploring the multiverse, beginning with the 2021 Disney Plus series Loki, which centers on the god of mischief being recruited by the mysterious Time Variance Authority, whose goal is to maintain the sanctity of the sacred timeline. In the first season finale of Loki, Loki and his female variant Sylvie bear witness to the sacred timeline beginning to split as a result of their confrontation with He Who Remains. That conception of the multiverse features a blue tree-like time stream branching off into different paths. When Miguel O'Hara explains to Miles Morales how the multiverse works in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, this familiar imagery makes a return via a hologram. At this point, Sony has gotten a little obsessed with making reference to one popular Spider-Man meme in their films. In the post-credit scene of Into the Spider-Verse, Miguel O'Hara is introduced to Spider-Man 2099 as he travels to the universe of the 1967 Spider-Man animated series, recreating the meme image of two Spider-Men pointing at each other in an alley. The meme was again referenced on the set of No Way Home, when the three actors also recreated the image during a behind-the-scenes costume fitting. Now with the release of Across the Spider-Verse, the meme makes its on-screen appearance yet another time, albeit under slightly different circumstances. After learning of the Spider Society's intention to let Miles' father be killed by the Spot, Miles makes an escape from their facility as O'Hara orders everyone to stop Spider-Man. Even the casting choices in Across the Spider-Verse contain Easter eggs. Among the varied voice cast, there are also two members of the Lonely Island, a sketch troupe that gained notoriety on Saturday Night Live for creating viral digital shorts like Lazy Sunday and The Shooting. Jorma Taccone, who previously voiced several minor characters in Into the Spider-Verse, appears early on as a variant of the Vulture inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. Alongside Taccone, Andy Samberg also makes an appearance in the film as Ben Reilly, aka Scarlet Spider, a moody variant who serves as a high-up member of Miguel O'Hara's Spider Society. Reilly, a clone of Peter Parker, made his comic book debut in 1975, before he later adopted the Scarlet Spider persona in the 90s. During his first appearance in the film, Samberg's Reilly is seen in Nueva York, contemplating his tragic backstory before later joining O'Hara in hunting down Morales on Earth 1610. Samberg's appearance in particular may be an Easter egg to his work on Saturday Night Live, as the comedian appeared on several occasions dressed as Spider-Man hanging upside down. One of those times was during the monologue of Emma Stone in 2011, where he unsuccessfully tried to recreate the 2002 film's iconic makeout scene with her in front of her then-boyfriend and co-star Andrew Garfield.
He's British! America's suffering record unemployment and we outsource Spider-Man to England?
Despite his importance to Miles Morales' story in Into the Spider-Verse, Jay Johnson's Peter B. Parker doesn't appear in Across the Spider-Verse until towards the end, when he's revealed to be another member of Miguel O'Hara's Spider Society. With him, Parker has taken along his infant daughter, Mayday Parker, who has adopted her father's ability to climb walls. Mayday Parker is a fairly important character in Marvel Comics history, first appearing in a What If comic from 1997, where Mary Jane Watson never loses her baby with Peter Parker. Mayday Parker is born and becomes Spider-Girl, though in that comic, Mayday's powers don't develop until she's a teenager. She later made her official Marvel Comics debut after positive fan response to the What If comic. Though the infant Mayday gets most of the attention in Across the Spider-Verse, other variants of Mayday also appear throughout the Spider Society sequence, albeit ones that come from a different universe than Peter B. Parker's. After a cameo appearance in the post-credits scene of Into the Spider-Verse, the Spider-Man from the 1967 ABC animated series makes a return appearance in Across the Spider-Verse. This classic version of Peter Parker pops up to attempt to stop Miles' escape from Nueva York. Unfortunately, this version of Spider-Man doesn't pose much of a threat and is almost immediately dispatched by Miles. This Peter Parker isn't even the only Spider-Man who debuted on TV to make an appearance in Across the Spider-Verse. The Japanese Spider-Man from the 1978 Japanese live-action series also shows up as part of the Spider Society, accompanied by Josh Keaton's version of Peter Parker from The Spectacular Spider-Man. And in a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment, the Spider-Man from Spider-Man Unlimited can be seen chasing Miles, web cape and all. If you've been watching your Spider-Man movies, then you've probably noticed some familiar moves from your favorite web-slinger, or web-slingers, as the case may be. During one sequence where Miles, Gwen, and Pavita attempt to stop the Spot from wreaking havoc in Moonbarton, Pativa rescues a bus full of citizens, including his girlfriend, from falling off a bridge. You might notice that the scene closely resembles a moment in 2002 Spider-Man, where Spider-Man rescues a group of citizens, including Mary Jane Watson, from the Roosevelt Island tramway. It pops up again in Spider-Man Homecoming, when Peter saves his classmates, including his romantic interest, Liz, from the Washington Monument. Another iconic Spider-Man move that's referenced in Across the Spider-Verse is Tom Holland's trying to hold a split ferry together in Spider-Man Homecoming, which is referenced by a lone Spider-Man in Nueva York, making himself into a bridge that a crowd of spider people try to run across. The ending of Across the Spider-Verse features some familiar faces for audience members who loved Into the Spider-Verse. Abandoned by the Spider Society, Gwen Stacy realizes that Miles has ended up in the wrong universe and recruits a team of spider people to help rescue him from the clutches of his alternate self. That group includes Into the Spider-Verse characters like Peni Parker, Peter Parker, and Spider-Man Noir, as well as Peter B. Parker and Mayday. However, Peni Parker's mech has received some upgrades since the last time audiences saw her in Into the Spider-Verse.
I'm from New York in the year 3145. I have a psychic link with a spider who lives inside my father's robot. And we're best friends. Forever.
In that film, her mech resembled an actual spider. But this time around, it bears a closer resemblance to Peni Parker's original mech design from her Edge of Spider-Verse comic debut. In turn, the comic book version of the mech is its own Easter egg. The storyline of Peni Parker drew lots of inspiration from Neon Genesis Evangelion, a Japanese anime centered on a group of teenagers who pilot a weaponized mech. Just like Peni. According to artist Jake Wyatt, he included several characters from Neon Genesis Evangelion as Peni's classmates in the Edge of Spider-Verse comic as a tribute to their inspiration. The twist ending of Across the Spider-Verse finds Miles mistakenly ending up in the wrong universe after using Miguel O'Hara's technology to send himself home. Since the spider that bit him was from Earth 42 rather than Earth 1610, Miles ends up in a version of his world where there is no Spider-Man. Even worse, a Miles of this world has been raised by his uncle Aaron to become the Prowler. What truly changes things for Miles is when Aaron takes him to the roof of their building, and Miles sees a graffiti tribute to his father, Jefferson Davis, instead of the tribute to Aaron in his universe. If you were shocked by this twist, you might have been too distracted to notice a subtle nod to the creators of Miles Morales in this tribute. Spray-painted in faint green ink near Jefferson Davis's graffiti memorial are the words Bendis and Pichelli, which refer to writer Brian Michael Bendis and illustrator Sarah Pichelli. The two creators of Miles Morales are probably used to being referenced in this way, since they also appeared in Miles' phone contacts in Into the Spider-Verse. Bendis and Pichelli are also referenced in Spider-Man Homecoming and the files for Donald Glover's Aaron Davis, with one of his criminal aliases being Brian Pichelli.